Welcome to this week's episode of Making Sense of It All. I'm your host, Jesse Stakes. So when I think of accounting, my mind immediately goes to financial reporting. You know, bookkeeping and tax returns. But the world of accounting is so much bigger than that, and sometimes it's even more exciting. My guest this week helped broaden my perspective on the accounting profession, and I think he will yours too. Josh Shilts of Shilts CPA in Jacksonville, Florida, provides individuals, businesses, attorneys, and government agencies with an industry-recognized valuation, forensic, and litigation support service. Don't know what forensic accounting is? Well, I didn't either until he explained it to me. I never knew that you could be in the courtroom testifying over 100 times in a year as an expert witness being a CPA. As someone wise once told me, you don't know what you don't know. Josh is a wealth of knowledge, and he does a great job passing that knowledge along to his fellow CPAs and consumers. Josh is the host of the AICPA podcast, Forensic and Valuation Services, on which he educates fellow CPAs on the value of forensic accounting and producing valuations for clients' businesses and their assets. I'm happy to continue sharing what Josh does, but I think he will do a far better job than I do. So without further delay, let's jump right into my conversation with Josh Shilts.
Hey, Jesse, nice to be here, man. Thanks for having me on.
So, Josh, I've known you for a little while. Tell our audience, as far as what your specialty is. You're a CPA, but you're a unique CPA to say the least.
Yeah, that's always brought up to me. I love it when my wife introduces me to people and they go, "Oh, great, you can do my taxes." So, yeah, I'm a CPA, but I'm a specialist. I do expert witness work, consulting work with other institutions, large organizations, and different individuals and families. Forensic accounting, business valuation are really my go-to areas. I do a lot of expert witness work, like I said, in business disputes, family law issues, valuation, hidden assets, business disputes, doing economic damages, lost profits. And then there's forensic accounting where, we'll investigate potential allegations of misappropriation or conversion of assets, which is fraud. That's just a really cute way of saying it. There's unique projects that I've been involved in, working for institutions and going and looking at the quality of earnings of a potential acquirer, or working on the processes and controls from a compliance standpoint, like anti-fraud or Bank Secrecy Act compliance. I have a background in that, and my team assists me there. So I'm a CPA, but I got some other letters too.
Sounds like it. It sounds like eating an elephant. I think we'll have to take this one bite at a time. So let's start just for the lay people out there. When you're talking about forensic accounting, when they hear that, they're probably thinking CSI, or they're thinking something on the, as far as what it would look like from a
yeah.
I think for me, police pop into mind, or for the word
Sure.
Forensic gets stuck out there. What is forensic accounting?
The word's what gravitated me towards the profession. I'll be really honest with you. I had planned to be a lawyer. The only reason I was getting my undergrad in accounting is we had a family friend who was a law professor, and he basically, said, look, if you really want to differentiate yourself, and, after I got into it and the challenge was there with it, I did recognize it would be a good skill set, right? And so in the state of Florida, to get your CPA license, you need another additional year of education. So I went and got a master's with a concentration in forensic accounting at Florida Atlantic. And I was actually, during that time, I started working at my second firm, which was down in Miami, Fort Lauderdale area, doing that type of work. And I just fell into the pitfall of it. But what is forensic accounting? It's such a broad interpretation of that. I mean, yeah, there is an investigative side of that. There's unique skills. Forensic usually means, well, at least for my profession, means we're preparing something in anticipation or for litigation. But I think to the general public, when they think about forensic accounting, the way that they should look at it as there is a financial issue of some sort, whether that's valuation, audit, accounting, finance, that requires that kind of background and skill set to investigate that. I'm a CPA, but I also hold a CFE, so I'm a certified fraud examiner, as well as certified in financial forensics. So I went and, in addition to, auditing and the tax and the regs, financial statements, I went a different path, and I started to acquire the working on these types of engagement. I mean, I always tell people, they go, well, what's something you worked on that I would know? Lehman Brothers, for example. Okay. So yeah. But, I went and got certified and got credentialed in these different areas. I also got credentialed in business valuation. But if you think about forensic accounting, I would say you have a financial issue that requires investigative skills to look into something. I think a lot of times people are very unclear of what it is. So one of the things that I do is I triage the allegation. So, sitting down with a professional like myself or some colleagues of mine, they should be walking you through those issues as much as just telling you, oh, I'm going to go and look for a fraud or something of that nature.
Well, and I think that's, it's very telling. I mean, it kind of touches on your passion for the law. You wanted to be an attorney when you were younger, and this is kind of a side door into that because you're in court all the time.
Yeah. It took a while to get there, to, build yourself up, to raise your right hand and do all that. And that's been a skill set that's different that you have to go through learning in the litigation setting. But yeah, I do like it. What I like is at the end of the day, I'm independent and objective, right? Because you hire me because of my credibility as much as my skill set.
Right.
And so my consistency, not just in my delivery, communication, but also my methodologies, creates confidence, not just in my own work, but then in the marketplace. So that credibility is something that's very, very important, not just to me, but to people that do this types of work. So how do we maintain that credibility and be able to go into a court and do that? But I like it because I say, look, I'm not making an argument or anything of that nature, but you do have an impact. It is a little bit, and I've got to work with a lot of really good attorneys and learn the process of law from a different vantage point, as well as the business of law. And I think, when you get into a dollars and cents and you can look at something objectively and say, I understand the emotional side of going after it, but let me talk to you about financially what this does to you, right? Because there's a cost benefit of analysis. I have a very good friend who always said to me, litigation is the sport of kings. And I try and, let my clients know that, especially when they're talking to me and, I give them a quote for service. They go, well, we're dealing with 7-figure, 8-figure problems sometimes. So,
right.
I think that's important too for the general public to know that, just forensic accounting. I get calls sometimes, $500, that ain't a fraud, right?
I understand completely. Well, and it's you get the opportunity to be, even if you're working from one side or another, you're essentially an objective witness in a courtroom. You don't have to be the bad guy. You're not up there badgering somebody. You get to actually just showcase your expertise and speak to the facts. You don't have to pick one side or the other per se.
Not to say that I don't take my fair share of punishment up there, because you're right. I'm not the bad guy, but in some people's eyes, I am the bad guy. So there is that I always tell people, especially younger folks that are thinking about, getting into this profession, like why? Because some people would look at me and go, oh, I don't want that in my life. I think it takes somebody who the juice runs a little bit deeper, right?
Sure.
You like that chess match of they're going to try and question me. I know they're trying to trip me up, or, how can I stay on top of that? I think that while it's pressure and it's stressful, it fulfills, like that. I always tell people the only other time I felt like that in life was, and this is my Al Bundy moment, when I was in high school on Friday nights playing football. But I think, to be in your 40s and still get those butterflies, I used to think that was something that was, oh, why do I want to go through that in life? Right.
Sure.
And I try and tell this to younger folks that are getting into the profession and dealing with pressure. And I think this holds true for any profession. Yeah, that's a little bit scary, but that's what life's all about.
No
feeling
doubt.
Those, and someone once said to me, life's about moments. And so while they're stressful and whatnot, I do recognize the moment and how lucky I am, to be in those situations, to achieve some goals that I've wanted to do. But I also think that that's what gives me my competitive edge, if you will.
No doubt. Well, and it's funny, I say this to people a lot. There's not a whole lot of things that you can fulfill that that competitive feeling when you're in your 40s or in your 50s, or whenever after high school or college athletics. Whenever it stopped for most people lose that opportunity to compete. So to be able to feel a win, or to be able to feel what that feels like, to feel like you're on a field again, or feel like you're kind of you can win or lose. It is a fun feeling. That's why people gamble. That's why people like to play cards or any kind of games or anything when they're older. People, there's a lot of people that are inherently competitive, and I raise my hand. I'm one of them.
I think you bring up a good point too. Like the stakes are risen, right? I mean, obviously, behavior wise, I always focus. When I got into fraud examinations, they teach you, pressures, opportunities, incentives. So I look at that in interactions in a mediation or even a deal. I assist business owners with buys and sells of assets and businesses from time to time. And I understand the emotions. So it's like understanding those behaviors and why you're acting that way, and trying to use that energy appropriately. As you get older and as you mature personally and professionally, if you still are getting that, man, you can be really happy in life, I would say.
No doubt. Let's talk about that a little bit. You brought it up, business valuations. That's another part of your practice. What you do. A lot of people think, they just go very simple. They think, I know we do it in banking, so I'm guilty of it as well. Sometimes we think 3 times book revenue for annualized revenue, and that's the value of the business. It's a lot deeper than that. That you have a lot. There's a lot of things that go into the valuation of a business. Tell our audience a little bit about what you do in your process there.
Sure. And this is where forensic accounting, I say, gets broad, because, it kind of started for me in that fraud sense, right? And then I started learning about the bankruptcy, so solvency, and then tracing and all of those things. And then it must have been 12, 15 years ago, started getting into economic damages and lost profits. And if businesses are damaged, what is the profits that are lost? And then that's where I would say the valuation started for me. And over the last 7 years, I've obtained some designations. So I'm accredited in business valuation. That's an ABV. And then recently this year, I became an accredited senior appraiser, an ASA. I mean, just to put it into perspective, there's probably about 1,100 ASAs in the world. And I think there's like 2,500 ABV, or it might be more than that now. It used to be you had to be a CPA and an ABV. So those 2 credentials, and then there's another credential, CBA. You need to have those to submit a business valuation for the IRS. Okay, those are what the IRS is. And so when you have those types of standards and you are doing that for estate and gift purposes, whatever it may be, we get called in as experts in litigation or in mergers and acquisitions, because to your point, I try and tell to people that valuation, I try and keep it simple. You have an asset, there's a return on that asset, which is measured on an income statement. And then it's really, let me understand the economy, let me understand your market, your customers. And, to give everyone an example, it's a 150-page report. Okay.
Sure.
Most of these. And we're able to go through then and explain our conclusion onto that. So that valuation, I really have a passion for that. I do a podcast for the AI CPA, where it's the forensic and valuation services. I've done about 25 over the last year, where I've had numerous guests on that we talk about business valuation. That profession, we get involved in so many different things: estate and gift, mergers and acquisitions, divorces, partnership disputes, buyouts, and to be able to walk into a situation, take that forensic, that audit, the financial knowledge, and then have a valuation which has a lot of finance, macro and microeconomic to it. I pride myself on, I got a lot of things that I think I'm really good at, but I also know when to pick up my toolbox and take my client to somewhere else. But I think you need to be a little bit well-versed to identify when you have to bring that to a client.
No doubt. Well, and I'm looking at the degrees on your wall right now, and you have all of the certifications, and you have all of the boxes that you need to check to be able to do these things. But it's just like anything else. There's an art and there's a science to everything. And it's I think what people will realize, even listening to this or hearing you speak on it, is that, you're not just accredited to do these things, but you have the experience, and you're pretty good at the art of business valuations, of doing the tasks that forensic accounting requires of you.
Well, I would tell anyone, and I would say, I think, as accountants, we kind of get labeled as, individuals who are not the greatest, or not known as the greatest communicators.
You don't say.
Right?
I've never heard that before about an accountant.
Yeah, right. And I think in the role that I play, I'm not trying to say that isn't true. There isn't some truth to that.
Sure.
Obviously, in the role I play, I have to communicate. I got to be able to get up there and take a very complex issue and explain it to a judge, a jury, whoever, and make them understand it. Because to your point, check the box, and I can make it sound, we can talk about company specific risk premium into the capital models and, restricted stock studies. But if no one understands it, who cares? And right. I try and explain this to everyone, like, it's the gift of gab. I've heard that before too. But, not only can I do it verbally, you have to be a very good writer. You have to know what to write. You have to be aware of how that's going to be interpreted. Writing is such a lost art, right? And so I try and tell people that the two biggest skills that have helped me in my career is, I could always talk, but then I think the biggest thing is, learning what to say and when to say.
No doubt.
But my writing skills, I had mentors that pounded that into me, and that helped me because I love to write for articles, but even emails. I'm sure we all deal with it now. We're all getting text messages, Microsoft Teams messages, like the amount of information that all of us in business and in life have to just process through here. And the fact that people aren't clearly communicating, drives me bonkers. So I think writing is something, when you write an expert report or a valuation report or, a letter of findings to something, they got to understand it. And you also have to comply with all that. So that's also something that I think is, challenging, because writing is not an easy skill.
No, and it's and I think it's just like anything else. If you don't practice it, if it's not something that you do on a regular basis, it's very easy for that skill to get dull, even if you had a talent for it before. So
yeah,
I think it's,
and I think, as we're talking, you can see why I like this profession. I don't do the same thing every day, man. Like,
sure.
I get to do a lot of different things and sharpen my sword as a person, as a professional. And I think that's what I've gotten the most joy out of. So when people ask me what is forensic accounting, it's a professional, and it's a professional that can do what a professional should do: write, speak, identify issues, and advise clients on those.
Very well said. I think that there's an old saying that if you want to figure out if you actually understand something, try to teach it to somebody else. And I think that you do that on a regular basis. And just kind of to jump into something else, you do a lot of educational seminars. You do a lot of things for the AICPA and for other groups to educate them on this topic. So it's not like you're just out here, you're not just raising your hand saying, hey, I know what I'm talking about. You're proving it every day by also teaching it to others.
Well, that goes to a lot of things, man. So like when people ask me, why are you doing that? Well, number one, practice makes perfect. I got to get up and I got to speak. To do it in front of peers or other attorneys and to build rapport with that and comfort with that is extremely helpful. Number one, also to credibility. You know what I mean? Like, you want to get up there. I like being challenged by my peers. I mean, one of the things that I did when the AICPA kind of came to me and said, it was during COVID, we want to get this podcast going. And so I reached out to the names, the men and women that had written the books in my field in business valuation. And I did that because I kind of wanted to test my own acumen, but then I also, wanted to talk the talk. And so number one, it helps with your credibility, but number two, what it also helps with is building those skills. Can I present something that others will understand?
Right. Taking the overcomplicated and simplifying it.
Absolutely, man. I tell my clients, I take the very complex and I make it digestible. So the trier, the decider understands it, and my clients at times are emotional. Most of the time they're going through a major life reason. That's why I meet these people, I mean, let's be honest. They're going through a divorce. They're going through a dispute with a business partner. They're maybe making an acquisition or a divestiture of a very material part of a family estate, their own estate. Somebody stole from them, right? I get those calls. We have a problem vendor in South America that we acquired, and because of the UK Bribery Act, Josh, we're a little worried about that relationship. So, there's like an ER doctor. You can react as an ER doctor, but you got to be able to sit back, to your point, and diagnose and advise that, right? Like, there's a little bit of trauma going on here. And so I've learned that from some good attorneys, and working with them on helping their clients diagnose the problem and where they need to go with it.
Josh, I feel like your second act in life could be as a author of some great fiction books, as far as just taking some of your real life experiences and turning them into stories.
It does sound cool, man, but there's a grind to this too. Like,
sure,
it's not all glitz and glamour. You gotta like the hunt. So that nervousness that I talked about, that starts when I'm looking at tax returns, or when I'm looking at bank statements, or when I'm interviewing somebody and all of that. So, do I put a little bit of pressure on myself? Well, yeah, I got somebody sitting here in my office who's got a problem here, and they're expecting me to fix it. And so I put pressure upon myself, but, that's what's kind of fun about that. It's not just processing tax returns or, counting cash. I've done all that kind of stuff before.
Sure.
Life is about challenges and taking on those challenges. And, it's funny you bring that up. Like, yeah, you check all the box and everything. And there was a time in my life where if I would have sat back and, I look at my email signature and what I have on there, I'd go, this guy's made it. But I tell this to everyone, it's a journey. And so just enjoy it. And I know that's cliche said, but until you recognize that, you're not going to find fulfillment in life. There's peaks, there's valleys, just enjoy it. That would be my number one thing, in going into business, how I went into it and how it's been over the last few years. That would be the one thing I've learned. In addition to, business is hard, but there's always tomorrow. And
No doubt.
I think as a business owner, having a positive outlook, recognizing an issue and solving that, or getting creative on how to fix that is also part of the fun. And if it's stressing you out, then it might not be the right thing for you.
Very true. So what inspired you to start your own business? I know why you went into accounting. You talked about that before, but what inspired you to hang your own shingle and put your name on the front of the door?
As my wife says, it was the push I needed. I've been in business now 7 years about.
Okay.
But the idea started eight and a half years ago. I had wanted to go out, and I had a corporate job at the time and was allowed secondary employment. But about 90 days before I acquired a tax practice, hoping for cash flow, because I had no clients at the time, that corporate position let me go. And my wife was pregnant with her third, 7.5 months. So you get put into that situation. Obviously I'm an overachiever, man. Like, that's how I've always been in my life. Like, I want to check the box. I want to get the pat on the back, right? I'm part of that generation.
Right.
And I got the wind knocked out of me, right? And I had to go through some tough times, and there were some other tough times. If you look at my firm now, Shilts CPA, there's only one named partner. There used to be two of us. So, being put in that situation, having a young family, recognizing the obligations I have to them, as well as business obligations, I hung my shingle and I went to work. I just started making relationships. Jacksonville really opened itself up to me. I'm from South Florida. I have a lot of my mentors and relationships. I could have, ducked my tail and went back there, but I wanted to build something. I wanted to build a firm where people were excited to come to work, right? Like, I had worked in situations where I felt pressures, and the only pressure I wanted to feel was the pressure inside of myself to accomplish some of it. So I got the push I needed, Jesse. And, people tell you, right? Like, that's kind of how it happens. And that's how it happened. And I had a divorce case, then I had an HOA fraud audit, and then, well, I saw your work over here and where I saw your work over there. And now, I do work across the state. I've testified across the state. We're even doing work now outside of the state. I have a case in Montana right now, believe it or not. It's a Montana, Texas case, so it's a federal case out there.
Sure.
We do a lot of specialized work because of, not just me, but the team I have behind me. I got some really good people that support me, make sure I'm crossing my T's and dotting my I's too. But yeah, man, we've been able to build out a niche, and I'm really excited about the future. There's not a lot of people who do what I do,
Sure.
Especially at my age group. We kind of got like an aging profession. So getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Well, I think it's, what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
100%. And the beauty of it was, like, I'm out there. I know I gotta make money. I know what I gotta do to make money, but how do you bring it in? So creativity in marketing, in sales, right? Like, there's marketing, then there's sales of it. And, all those things, man, have made, I always tell people, like, valuing a business, I'm a business owner, so I'm feeling the things that an owner or a manager feels as well too.
Sure.
And those skill sets complement each other. They complement. Listen, I acquired a business. It was a tax practice that had that model. We don't do taxes anymore, so we've had to change our model. And there's not a lot of firms like us in the southeastern United States, let alone nationally. I mean, yeah, you could go to a corporate firm, a large firm, and they could pull somebody from New York or whatever. But there's situations where you need an individual or an individual in his select team to solve that. So we're excited about the profession. We're excited about our company. We feel like we've done some things that kind of change how we service clients, how we solve problems.
Yeah. Well, you said it. You're excited about the future, and I hear you guys have, by nature of being successful and finding success within that niche, you're moving upstream. You're being called into larger problems, into problems that are not necessarily contained within your local market, but you're getting outside of it. But that also leaves a demand for services, for that market that's underneath where you're serving now. Going back to you're starting to educate people with through the AI CPA. What do you see as far as, you said there's a demand for it. You said there's also a lot that the profession is aging. How do you see that? What do you see for the future as far as, for the younger people that are going into accounting, or how do you get them to want to specialize in forensic accounting? How do you get them to see what you do and to find it sexy and want to do it?
I think that's a great question. So I'm 41, just to give a kind of a frame of reference of where we're at in life. And I came out of, a mid-sized firm. I also worked at the Big Four in New York City. So I've seen the firms and those operating models. And I think we've all, it's always kind of the same thing. Well, you got to be a staff for 2 years, and then you're a senior, and then you're a manager, and then a senior manager, and then maybe you're a principal or a director, and then, you become a partner, and, there's your big white house and your golf course membership. And they've kind of, but I had a really good friend of mine who used to be a partner at one of those big firms. And we were talking about some of those practices and how they're starting to basically die off because a 40-year-old Josh isn't around. Why didn't that happen? Right. And I think it was because of that model. And so one thing I've recognized in my practice, first of all, there's a lot of problems. Which problem really needs me, right? I think is number one. Which problem can I solve, and how can I supplement to solve that too? As opposed to, we'll just solve it all. All right.
Fair point.
And then number two is, I think that latter needs to be redefined, especially with the younger generation, right? Because what I'm seeing is much more entrepreneurial for them. So, right. For example, I have strategic relationships with independent contractors, in various parts, that if I have a spillover in work, these are individuals that should be at firms. We could all be at one firm, but they're at entrepreneurial, and they will help me in certain situations, right? And these are CPAs, ASAs, quality professional. They just don't want to work for somebody right now. But I do think, and they've cut their teeth, so I get that, right? So instead of me having a partnership, I have a loosely affiliated agreement with a lot of really smart people there.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Secondarily, for my staff, I view it more as an apprenticeship. And what I mean by that is, yes, you can go and work at whatever firm and you can follow that and you can work for the senior manager or the manager. But I had worked at large firms, I had worked at medium firms. What I found out is, if you want to be somebody who does expert witness, if you want to be the tip of the point and the spear on those types of projects, you should sit down and you should work with me and you should watch me for a day and you should see how I'm communicating and all of that. And collaboration is huge in what I do. So for me, it's about, is there an individual who has an interest in this, is willing to work, is on kind of that career path, and let's work closely and let's see if we can, and then I think, as a professional, you do get to a point. Do I want to sell and have my own practice, which means control your own revenue? All right, then let's go do that. I get it. Congrats. Like, that's the dream of it, right?
Right.
Or are you somebody who's more just comfortable, being that support? And I have that type of person too, where, they don't want to testify, but they're super smart, right?
Sure.
They just don't want to go through that. So again, it's apprenticeship. I think, it takes a unique personality. The people that I see that do what I do or aspire to do what I do are very unique. You know what I mean? Very collegial, though. It's a blast. But yeah, I think, what I would say to anyone who's interested, reach out. You know what I mean? If you got an accounting background, here's the one thing I would say. If you got an accounting background or a finance background, yeah, call. Maybe this is something that interests you. But maybe you got a mathematics background. Maybe you have some sort of analytical skill, right? Maybe you like the investigative side and you don't know the numbers, but you're a really good writer.
Sure.
That's the beauty of, a team aspect, is a team's got to have a lot of different skill sets that complement each other. And that's where I say there's an apprenticeship, because as you can see, people will look at me and say, though, you're well-rounded. Well, that doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen by, like that, right?
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of repetition.
But I am at a point in my career where I want to help others do that as well, too, because we need it in our profession. And the public, values the CPA, it values these other credentials as problem solvers. So, how do we get more of us out there, Jesse? That's a really good question that at every level I talk to in every firm, we're trying to understand. But I don't think our profession's dealing with that singularly. So if anything, I would just champion to anyone that I got a really cool job and, call me.
No doubt. Well, and you said it in there, and I think that's a big change that the business world and that the world in general, like with the newer generation that's becoming of work age, they want to be collaborative. They're not necessarily as competitive as generations were in the past.
They want to be partners, I think.
Absolutely.
What I'm listening to and hearing, right? Like, so what's the role within the firm, right? And roles change, right? Like, that's the beauty of it. But it's difficult. I don't know if it's difficult. I just think we need to your point, we need to understand what their desires and wants are and what fulfills them, because what fulfills them might be very different than what fulfills me.
No doubt. And I think people, especially from your baby boomer generations and the people who invented the ladder, essentially, they like the ladder because they stayed in power. And the power struggle or the younger generation doesn't want it. They don't want to be a part of it. And to your point, they're looking for that circular table that everybody sits around and has a conversation, not necessarily speaking up to people and asking their permission. They want to feel like their ideas are valued. They want to feel like they're important. And to your point, it's, things change, structures change, and I think we have to be flexible enough as a society in general and as a business community to allow it to change and to get the best and brightest to where they can actually be effective and they can be as big a part of the solutions as they would desire to be.
I completely agree. Over the last 12 months, I've rethought my entire operating model and my entire service model. It was built on those traditional CPA firm models. And I just recognize that's not working. It's not working from a staffing perspective because I'm not getting the type of talent that I want into it. And I was banging my head as to why. So, really opened up. How do we serve it? We ask ourselves now, how are we servicing? What are we servicing? And what do we need to operate? And then once you can narrow it down to that, it's identifying the right resources. And that's what I said to you. I think, a lot of business owners, oh, I got to have an employee. I got to have an employee. You may need to learn, especially in a professional service organization,
Yes.
how to manage independent contractors as we move forward. I mean, I've lost people because they can go and do it by themselves. Let's just be honest with it. And they don't need the CPA in some situations.
Sure. And the world has shrank. You can do a job today that you didn't necessarily have access to 15 years ago.
What I would say to business owners who feel threatened by that, and I think a lot of business owners do, because I have been into that, is understand what options are out there for you then as a business owner. Because what I would say is, if you control the product and the service, you control the revenue, understand that. Don't forget that. And understand how you can identify individuals on Upwork.com who maybe can take over some core processes because you can't staff that. Or, you're looking for a certain specialty, and no, you're not part of a large firm anymore where that you could go to a central database, but now you are part of a organization or something you can find who has a specialty into that. So yeah, business is different, and I don't think it's changing. I just think we're evolving with the world that's around us right now, right?
No doubt.
Like, to your point, the behaviors and what is incentivizing for people is very different, right? And we can talk about what, was it politics? Was it the pandemic? What it is? It is what it is.
That's a whole nother. That's
a
whole nother show and a whole nother podcast. There's so much to talk about there.
Let's stop that. Yeah, I think, as a business community, we need to really. All I hear about is the workforce problem. But let me give everyone another good stat. And I'm a nerd, right? And there's actually a good book, and of course I forget it off the top of my head. I think it's like Men Without Work or something about that. And the book was written in 2016. And the guy he's an economist. He just re-released it here in 2022. And if you give me a second, I actually can find it for you real quick, what the name of the book is. Men Without Work. And the book was written by Nicholas Eberstadt. Okay, so what Mr. Eberstadt is saying is, there is the big employment problem is not the unemployment rate, that there is anywhere from like 7 to 8 million. His original book said there were 7 to 8 million men who just didn't work in America, and they weren't part of it. So what he's really saying is, if you look at the unemployment and say the unemployment is 5%, 6%, whatever it may be, that's only 1/5 of actual. If you put a gymnasium of 100 people in there, right? So that's the bigger issue. So we have 4 million job openings, right? And there's a lot of people that aren't working. And so he wrote that in 2016. So he opened up his book, and now he's doing it in 2022, and he added 2 more groups. Initially, he looked at men, I think, between the ages of 25 and 45. He's now included that same age group with women, and now he's including seniors, 55 plus, because we know, as part of the pandemic, or people talk about part of that. So now, we have a huge unemployment, is what it is. The demand is there, but really, why is the demand there is what this book gets into. So why do I say that? In my profession, you got to have passion. You don't have passion, I don't want to work with you. I've recognized that. I'm not here to motivate anyone. I do kind of believe that. The daycare at work thing, because I don't have time for that. I'm not Coca-Cola, man. I got people with problems, and they're expecting me to solve it. So what I'm focused on is finding those. Give me somebody with passion and grit. Give me somebody who got fired from corporate America. Give me somebody who was told they'll never be anything. Give me somebody that didn't get everything handed to them. And let's go to work, right? That's what's fun for me right now.
That's excellent. That's very well said. Josh, I wanted to touch on a couple of things. You have gotten a pretty cool following on social media, and you are starting to put out some educational videos, just touching on some subjects. You, as you said, you're doing the podcast with the AI CPA. What's the title of that podcast so our listeners can tune into it?
Sure. You can find it on Apple or Spotify. It's AI CPA F as in Frank, V as in Valerie, S as in Sam podcast. I just did one on the valuation of human capital. So we were talking about workforce, and I actually talked to a professor from Harvard, Ethan Rowan, about that. Why am I doing the videos? Because I see my kids on TikTok. I see how the world is. I see my own behaviors. I find myself spending more time on YouTube at night than I do watching the evening news. That's not to say that writing is not important. I still challenge myself to write technical articles every year, but I recognize that, no one wants to hear no one's going to read my, 5,000 word essay on the identification, allocation of intangible assets in context of a family law dissolution. Okay. But I might be able to put a 15-second, 1-minute video that talks about an issue and raises awareness about an issue. And I think that's important for attorneys and the general public that I service.
Well, it creates a question. If you can't ask a question if you don't know what to ask. So
Correct.
by you raising the topic, by you putting it out there for people to see, it's inspiring. It's inspiring questions. It inspires people's desire to learn. It gives somebody something that they didn't know before that maybe they want to learn a little bit more about. So I think it's really cool.
And anyone who's ever read anything in my profession, I'll tell people this, like, I have to highlight it in 3 different colors. One paragraph, I could read that thing 4 or 5 times. So instead of saying, oh, here, go read that article and let me know if you can understand it. By the way, I read this article, or I read this book, and he's going to tell you all this stuff. But here's what we got to focus on, right? Like, let me solve that. I already got the answer for you. Let me make you aware of it. So as you go through life, right? Like, let me build that awareness for you as well, too. I think you're spot on with that, Jesse.
Simplifying the overcomplicated. I think that's what you do very, very well for all of the people that are your customers, for the people that tune into your content. I think you're a tremendous resource. I feel like we just scratched the surface here, but I would love to have you back for another episode if you're up for it.
Jesse, I think what you're doing here is great. I think more of these types of conversations, especially at our local community level, are important. We talk about these things that are happening on CNN and MSNBC, but it's happening right back here in our own backyard in North Central Florida. And there's a lot of things here that, today I'd love to talk about in the future with you.
No doubt. Thank you so much for joining us, Josh. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
I'll be honest. If Josh didn't have clients waiting on him, I could have spoken to him all day. He has such a tremendous depth of understanding about a lot of different things. Josh, you have an open door here at Making Sense of It All to share on any number of topics that would benefit our audience anytime you want to come back. Well, that's going to do it for me this week. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll catch you guys next time.